From electric scooters to bump stocks, I sit down one-on-one with Charleston City Councilman Harry Griffin for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio. Councilman Griffin, it's so good to see you again.
Good to see you, buddy.
I appreciate it greatly. As we sit here right now, as you know, the nation is mourning the passing of United States Senator John McCain after his bout with brain cancer. Where are you emotionally with this news?
Man, it was tough. I was actually speaking to one of my good friends yesterday afternoon, just talking about Senator McCain's life, how he had decided to be taken off of treatment on Friday, and it just happened so quickly from that moment. He fought for a long time, over a year, fighting the disease. And you know, John McCain is a household name. He's a hero through and through. He's a patriot. He dedicated his life to public service, first in the military and then as a senator from Arizona. And you know, he was a presidential candidate a couple of times. He was the Republican nominee in 2008. Which was really a historic 2008, as we elected the first African-American president. But I think when we look back, we'll realize just how big that 2008 election was. You had one of probably the greatest, longest-serving, greatest senators that was really from our whole generation, from the 80s on. They all knew him. He's a household name. And it's just tough because now we're starting to lose some of these great elected officials that have done a lot for our country. And a new wave is going to come in, but what we have to do is continue to honor his legacy and all the good things that he did for our nation. And as these new younger politicians, myself included, we have to remember what these guys and girls have done for us, and continue on, learn from their mistakes, and really take their triumphs and continue to push to make our nation great.
Let me turn you back home, Charleston City Council. Describe to me the following in one word: bump stocks.
Stupid. You know, I'm glad we got rid of them or voted to make them illegal in Charleston. There's only so much a local municipality can do. But ultimately, I would like the federal government to ban bump stocks, unless, you know, obviously there's exceptions, military purposes, but there's no what happened in Las Vegas is an absolute tragedy, and it should never happen again. Electric scooters. Regulated. Now they're regulated in Charleston. We banned them. You know, it was kind of a really quirky situation, and our Traffic and Transportation Committee took it up, and we made the decision that we were going to regulate electric scooters, much like we do with golf carts downtown. It can be scary at times for people to be riding those scooters around, and we just have to make sure we keep everybody safe. And also, downtown traffic can be so bad, and when traffic is bad, somebody on a scooter could try to get around, maneuver around traffic. It's really just a safety mechanism. We have to make sure our streets are safe downtown. Charleston 9 being honored during the groundbreaking ceremony in West Ashley. Justified. We have to always honor them, because that is. I was actually there that night. I was a young kid. It broke my heart just to watch that building go down. And my grandfather was a fireman for the City of Charleston for over 30 years. And he had retired only a few years before that, and he was out of town that night. But I watched as several off-duty firemen showed up in board shorts and flip-flops and grabbed a hose and did everything they could to extinguish that fire. You know, the 9 men that lost their lives, they'll always be remembered. And anybody who serves in that station and in this department will know their names and the loss of life that they gave the City of Charleston. Their impact will always be felt because they dedicated their lives to our city. Yeah. And I know, obviously, when you and I spoke last night, you basically said you want to sit down and talk about the budget for next year. What would you put in, or what will you take out when it comes to this budget for the City of Charleston in your mind? Well, I just think we have to get our priorities straight. You know, we put so much money downtown. Last year we got approximately $30 million in accommodations and hospitality taxes. A lot of that comes from downtown, and so a lot of that is going to be spent downtown. You know, West Ashley put in, you know, in between 10 and 20% of those two hospitality accommodations. We received about 1% back. The majority of the money is going to go downtown in those aspects. However, downtown has advantages like tourism, like TIF districts, tax increment financing districts, that West Ashley, James Island, Johns Island, Daniel Island do not have. And for those reasons, and it seems the suburbs flood just as badly as downtown does. Downtown floods, but you could make the argument that more homes are impacted by the flooding in the suburbs, like West Ashley. So we're at some disadvantages. If you go back and look at the last couple of budgets, money appropriated for West Ashley is just not happening. And we have a serious flooding problem. We have a Church Creek Basin study that has been completed and has an estimated price tag of $44 million. Would you believe me if I said that in the past 40 years our city has only put $3.5 million into the entire Church Creek Basin? So to come up with 44, that is an outstanding amount compared to 3.5. Now at the same time, we've appropriated approximately $50 million, and there have been talks of $100 million for the lower battery wall. That's a lot of money. The West Edge project is going to end up being probably $250 million all said and done. I can understand why money is spent downtown, especially money that is created through tourism, deserves to go back to help make the resources better that the tourists are coming to see. However, to take money out of the general fund and not putting it towards West Ashley is wrong, especially when you have these other sources that bring money downtown. Let's just say, for an example, a project comes up, and it comes through Ways and Means, and we're voting on where the money is going to be appropriated, and it says that certain amounts of that money is coming out of the general fund, but it's also a TIF district. It doesn't make sense to pull the limited amount of funding resources that we have in West Ashley away from us. And because for far too long we haven't been a priority when it comes to the budget. If we don't do it now, we're gonna make our residents just so overwhelmed with where we're going, and they're gonna pack up and leave, and that would be the biggest detriment to Charleston. Tourism is great. I love the commerce that tourism brings. It's a driving force. We wouldn't be the same without it. But one of the biggest arguments and one of the biggest issues that we're going to see in the next couple of years, our city is in the balance right now. How are we going to balance tourism and the residents? We've already proven that we're the top city in the world to travel. You know, it's magazine after magazine. Go to Charleston, go to Charleston, go to Charleston. But Charleston is great because of the residents that live here. And tourism would be nothing if we didn't have our valued residents that work in the city. So we have to step up and make them a priority. And that is the basic needs like public safety, infrastructure, and flood relief. And if we don't do and affordable housing too. If we don't make Charleston affordable, and we don't make it safe, and we don't make it accessible, then we're doing a disservice to our people. And I can't stress that enough.
You talk about tourism. I got to talk to you about something that's developing right now, and that is about the Palmetto Artisans Program. As you know, the City of Charleston, I believe, in the Recreation Department and the Police Department have affiliated themselves with the Charleston River Dogs to allow the kids to sell Palmetto roses there. And I think they're coming to you guys at the Citadel football games too later on. Where should the discussion about the Palmetto Artisans Program, the Artisans Program, go in your mind?
I think that was a great, I want to credit, I believe it's Captain Chip Searson, who's a West Ashley guy, for pushing that to being able to have the kids sell them at the River Dogs. Unfortunately, their season's almost over.
Right.
So coming to us about the Citadel and maybe the College of Charleston basketball games or some other things, that would be a really good thing, because number one, the kids, they work hard, they're making the roses, they can sell the roses. But number two, they get to check out a really interesting game as well. They're in the stadium. They're either watching a baseball game or watching a football game or a basketball game. And so we need to help these kids. We need to do unique things for these kids. But we talked about this last time when you and I had an interview. The gentleman that was arrested was not arrested for selling roses. He was arrested for getting into a confrontation with a police officer. And so we have to differentiate those two situations. Number one is the illegal selling of the roses, and illegal selling of the roses, and then from that came an interaction with a police officer that became physical and led to an arrest. So to make sure we never get to that point again, we have to do a better job of making sure that our kids are selling roses legally, but we have to make it competitive for them as well. And I know that I believe it was either this week or maybe it's the beginning of next week. They're going to have their first task force meeting on that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to help out and listen in on those meetings. And I think Miss Ruthie Jordan, she's a great lady. She's just took over a new role with us.
Right.
And she's going to do a great job of facilitating the dialogue of what needs to be done to make this program successful. You know, it's a very good program. Yeah, it may need a couple tweaks here or there, but I believe that our dedicated staff and our task force, meeting with the kids, maybe doing some interactions at the schools to help them get in the program, is going to lead to a really successful continuation of this program that, in the grand scheme of things, has been very successful. But we had one incident recently that kind of put a dark cloud on it, but we'll get it back. I have total faith in that task force.
You talk about dialogue. Everyone I talk to is talking about Mayor John Tecklenburg in his first term in office. This is the headline from the Impulsive Queries on June 29th, and it reads this, the article written by Abigail Darlington. Charleston Mayor Tecklenburg will seek re-election. Here's how his first term is going. How is his first term going in your mind?
Well, I don't envy anybody that has to follow Joe Riley in 40 years in office. I think that the dialogue is missing still. You talk about dialogue. There's little interaction between the mayor and the city council, which is surprising and really alarming. We don't communicate well before the meetings of what's coming up. In fact, we as council members, we have a deadline to ask for things to be put on the agenda. But we don't sit in on the agenda meetings whatsoever. And so the agenda is actually made, our requests are usually granted, but 90 to 98% of the agenda is made up of the mayor and staff. We put a request in, and it gets placed on the agenda. My requests come from my constituents. You know, they say, Harry, we want some funding over here, or we want more interaction of what's going on in a certain situation. And so I reach out to our clerk and say, hey, I would like this to be put and all on the agenda. And I always went under petitions and communications. But what we just recently found out is that all council member requests are now put at the very bottom of the agenda under miscellaneous business. And for me, that it's a very tough situation, because number one, I would hate for us to categorize a request that our citizens made to their elected representative, and it goes on the agenda and it's characterized as miscellaneous business, because it doesn't look like it's important. And number two, by the time we get to the bottom of the agenda, the majority of the crowd has left the chamber. So what are we trying to accomplish here? You know, we have very limited access to the agenda before we see it just a few days before our council meetings. And so there isn't much communication there. I know the mayor meets with all the council members one-on-one each month. I don't know how successful that has been. That's not for me to say. I know that my one-on-ones have been hit or miss. I think it's more important for us to meet if we have a reason to meet, not just meet once a month just to meet. But I really thought that our interaction between the staff and the council would be stronger than it is. I know that transparency is so important for me. It was one of the reasons why I ran. I didn't feel like we were getting it at the time. And we hold a public office, and everything we do should be in the public. Certain things, legal matters and etc., go into executive session, and that with the people will understand those have to be behind closed doors, especially if there's a pending legal matter. But anything that's on our agenda that we make a motion on or have dialogue on, how we got to that point should be public knowledge. And if we have an item that's put on the agenda and we ask for something, there has to be a communication there. Perfect example.
Okay.
We just had, back in 2016, there was a hotel moratorium put on the agenda, and it did not go well because there was no communication there. And then it was put back on our agenda this past week with no communication, and it was deferred. But if we would have taken a vote, good chances it would have been voted down. And it's not because the item itself is so scary or so, so bad that it's going to make our city terrible, but when something like that is put on the agenda, something that impacts so many people, there has to be dialogue there. And there has to be a working relationship. We don't even know who put it on the agenda. Did the mayor put it on, or did the planning department put it on? We don't know because there's no dialogue there. That is going to be our biggest inhibitor, and it has been. And it will continue to be until we make changes. That is a fix that could be made tomorrow. The mayor could say, hey guys, I haven't done a good job of communicating with y'all. Whenever I put something on the agenda, I'll call you. Whenever I put something on the agenda, I call all the council members and talk to them about it, because it's important for them to know where I'm coming from. And so there's that disconnect on the agenda. The council has little say in what goes on, and now what's little say we do have, it ends up at the very bottom of the agenda. So how we handle that situation is going to be very important moving forward.
How is the mayor connecting with citizens? Because I hear from a lot of people that he's not connecting with them in that particular area either.
The mayor is a really, really nice guy. He has a great personality. I think that he made a lot of promises when he ran for office, some tougher than others. He does do a good job. He does a mayor's night in, right, where he has people come there. And he also goes out and does a coffee talk once a month, I believe, with the citizens. It's not an easy job to try to talk to 150,000 people. And a lot of the interaction, the one-on-one interaction, comes from us, the council, to our constituents, and then we bring the mayor in when need be. I think that the miscommunication with the people of Charleston is, number one, this was supposed to be West Ashley's time. That was the campaign promise, and it hasn't happened. This was the first mayor to not live on the peninsula. This was a guy who said he was going to bring a lot of emphasis back to West Ashley. And while we made good steps, like the West Ashley Revitalization Commission, that was a great commission to form. And from that we passed Plan West Ashley, which could do a lot of good for our city and revitalize West Ashley in a lot of ways. But right now it's all talk. We don't have any action because our budget doesn't reflect what we're trying to do. That's one of the hardest parts about being an elected official, is that, there's the feel-good moments, and then there's the real policy moments that you have to get behind. The social issues, by the next day, you have a different issue that like we just passed a resolution to tasked the state to increase gun laws for criminals and background checks and education and that sort of thing. But by the time we meet again, there will be a different resolution for us that is more of a social issue. But the policy issues, those are the ones that last for so long. Because the minute that you stick some money behind an idea and make it a reality, then it is going to directly impact the citizens that you represent. And so, last agenda, I put a request on that we go ahead and fund one of the Church Creek Basin study items. The Hickory Farms, that we're going to build a new, some flood mitigation back there and really help them because they've been flooded out. We've got water that goes through the middle of their neighborhood. We don't even have encroachments or easements or anything. The water's pounding in. It has a lot to do from the West Ashley Circle being formed. But the price tag on that project is about $500,000. We finished, Bob Horner and Weston and Sampson finished the Church Creek drainage study in January, February. For all this time, we haven't actually had a plan of action at all. We've had a list. We've worked on some updated policy recommendations that we're in the process of passing now on City Council. But we've been stagnant. We've just been under a moratorium and we haven't had a lot of action there. But at our last meeting, we passed the first reading of policy recommendations that'll make building in Church Creek. You know, these are going to be some of the toughest building regulations we've ever had. And two, we approved $500,000 to start there's 7 projects on that list. We had to start them. And so when you say there's a disconnect between the mayor and the citizens, there's a disconnect to the point that people are tired of hearing that it will get done and not seeing any money appropriated to do it. As soon as you put money behind a project, then people start believing you. If you say you're going to do it and, you know, something else comes up and next thing you know, we're approving another $6 million to the battery or some drainage project downtown, then people get skeptical and they say, well, what happened to West Ashley? You know, we've got more people living west of the Ashley, and that would be West Ashley, Johns Island. We have more people living there than in any other part of town. Peninsula has a fraction of the amount of people that live in West Ashley. So our priorities have to be put in order, and we've got to back up what we say we're going to do with the budget. The budget is the thing that matters the most. How you appropriate that money, that is going to either make or break you with the citizens of Charleston.
Councilman Harry Griffin, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.